Alright, you've been watching for 2.5 minutes or so on this part. That's how I light my forge every time. Get a draft going in the chimney, light it. Just let the key here is to not touch it yet, and let the coke that was left over from the last fire get going. I'm going to throw in a little bit more green coal now just to start getting that to coke up. Because once I start my welding process, I don't want to introduce any green coal into the mix. So this coal I'm throwing in is green, and as it gets exposed to the heat, it will start to transform into what we call coke, or we call it coke up, and that burns a lot purer than green coal, and that's going to be necessary during the forge welding process you're about to see. All right, so I'm bringing a little bit of the coke from the back here. There you have it. Stay tuned. Alright, so forge just about where I need it to be. I'm going to be introducing the billet here now for the first time. What I want to do is kind of create a nice cavity in here that I don't have to mess with much once I start the actual welding process. And the key here, and this is the real key, is we don't want to introduce impurities any more than we have to into the seams, because if it gets in there, it will be what causes a cold shut or an inclusion, which are going to be areas where the weld didn't set. Okay, a billet this size can take 20 minutes or so to get warm enough. I use Iron Mountain flux. I do also have plain old borax put in one of these, but I like Iron Mountain better. You'll hear people say you don't need it. I don't know what the true answer to that is, but I know ever since I've used the Iron Mountain flux, my forge welds have gotten better. Could it be that I've just gotten more experience? Yeah, I don't know, but I'm hooked on it. Alright, so you can see the layers are just starting to come up temperature. A few more minutes, I'll add some flux to it. Okay, the billet's getting hot enough now that flux will start to do what it needs to do. So I'm adding it for the first time. And I mainly am covering these seams the most. I'm trying to get where we get this little kind of glassy layer. A little bit on the outsides because it helps with scale formation. And if you look now, it's kind of looking like one piece just because of how the compound is melting and heating up on there. Okay. We're going to get up for a while more. Not anywhere yet near welding temp though. Okay, now you can see now the billet is starting to heat all the way through, but I don't know if this camera's letting the areas in the middle there's just some shadows still. And it's not even quite hot enough, but the billet needs to be almost a yellowish orange, and you can't see any cast or shadows through it. When you get to that point, even if there may be a few little like sparks coming off of it, I mean, it's right at its temperature where it's starting to, if it gets any hotter, it's going to start burning off carbon. That's the optimal point right there to go and do the actual weld. And you'll see shortly when I do that, I do most of my welds of a billet this size on my hydraulic press. It's a log splitter that I've converted. works really, really nice. So stay tuned. We still got a little bit to get this up to temp, but I'll show you how that works shortly. Now the interesting thing about forge welding is I'm using flux, whether I'm using this Iron Mountain or a standard 20 mule team borax. But there's a lot of people, and you can even see videos on YouTube now. There's people doing these without any flux. So we're almost there now, guys. I don't know how well the color is going to show up on here. I'm going to move the camera here now and set it up by the press. Now each weld I do further, basically I'm deepening the weld that has occurred, but the hard part's over now. I mean, I'm going to get this back up to critical a couple more times, make sure I've got solid weld throughout, and then draw it out. So stay tuned. Now I will typically bring her on the anvil and just kind of on the sides, I try to just make sure I can feel like the welds are there enough for me to really start my drawing out phase, okay, where I'm going to really start working up the pressure. And alright guys, I'm getting forge going here for the next day. I only got a short bit in yesterday doing the initial forge weld you saw before this. I had other things to do. So I'm getting my forge up to operating temperature now. I just wanted to show you before I get started where I'm at from yesterday. This is the billet that started at 17 layers. It is welded together at this point. But I will still do one more really high smooth compression just to make sure, and then I'm going to draw it out. I try to keep these around this thickness here, so I'll have to apply pressure this way with the press, as well as on these sides. So as you squeeze it with the dies I have I've made out of a railroad track, when I squeeze here, the billet's going to lengthen this way mostly. So, and because of how it's set up, if I hold it in one position, the billet will slowly start to drift down. So you'll see me flipping it over quite often, and that's to help compensate for that. The key on these as you're making them is to try to keep them going out as straight as you can, but certainly if it's starting to get a little arc or a curvature to it, correct it sooner than later, because if it gets too far out, it's really difficult sometimes to get this thing back nice and straight. And in the long run, what I need to end up with is a real skinny, long piece of metal that's straight, or I can't make a good knife out of it. So anyhow, here it is. I'm just going to do a close-up here. You can still see a few lines in it, but I would, you know, from my experience from doing a lot of Damascus, that's a solid forge welded billet. So, looks really good. Okay? So stay tuned. There'll be more to come. That's my flatter I built. Okay, there's where we're at right now. Nice and flat, great welds. I don't see any problems. We're going to take this in and draw it out a little bit more, and then we'll be ready to cut it up. There's my billet. So far, it's looking great. Alright guys, this is the end of the first series of welding for forge welding this billet. This piece started out, if you recall, 3 inches long, 1.5 inches wide, and 17 layers thick. We're still around 1.5 inches wide, which I want to keep because when I introduce new layers, I want them to fit in the same width, so I don't have to modify them. It went from 3 inches long to 16 inches long, okay? So I'm letting it cool. We're going to cut it up and show you what comes next. Pretty cool, eh?